Oh, it's terrible.
Jan, if boys don't find you attractive, don't blame it on me.
That there was some kind of going on with them too. That's all I know.
The Brady Bunch cast can finally speak on this forbidden scene. From the 16-year-old who kissed his TV mother to the addiction that cost one cast member a career-defining role, the truth was always too dark for the family-friendly image.
Well, Barry was always, from the beginning, I think he had a big crush on me. The delightful young man with these big green eyes who, and great big hands. And
equipment fell from ceilings and nearly child actors. Feuds between TV sisters turned so toxic that reunions had to be canceled.
I notice a little bitterness on the Brady Bunch. Is there some bitterness there?
No, it's not bitterness. It's just that the sheer repetition of the whole thing. It's next to impossible to be what I don't know what people want me to be.
Now, after years of silence, the surviving cast members are finally revealing the forbidden scenes, the dangerous moments, and the secrets that producers spent decades trying to bury. So let's get into it. Barry Williams turned 16 during the filming of The Brady Bunch. He'd been playing Greg Brady, the oldest son of the perfect television family, for 2 years. And he'd developed feelings for Florence Henderson, the woman who played his mother on screen.
Well, Barry was always, from the beginning, I think he had a big crush on me. The delightful young man with these big green eyes who, and great big hands and feet.
Williams didn't keep his crush quiet among the cast. Everyone knew. The crew knew. Henderson knew. But Williams decided to act on it. He invited Henderson out to dinner at a nightclub, just the two of them, away from the studio and away from the cameras. Henderson accepted. She was in her 30s, married, and apparently didn't realize that Williams viewed the evening as a date. She thought they were going out as friends, as cast members, spending time together outside of work.
He loved music, and he loved hearing about the musical theater, and he loved hearing about nightclubs and all of those things. And that's what actually precipitated our date.
They sat in the nightclub talking. Williams worked up his courage throughout the evening. When the moment felt right, he leaned in and kissed her. Not a peck on the cheek, a real kiss. Henderson kissed him back briefly before pulling away. Henderson later described the incident as innocent and blown out of proportion. She emphasized it was a one-time occurrence that didn't go beyond that single kiss. She claimed she hadn't understood Williams' romantic intentions when she accepted the dinner invitation. Williams talked about the kiss publicly years later, including it in his memoir. He portrayed it as a teenage crush that led to one memorable evening. Henderson's response was always measured, downplaying the significance while acknowledging it had happened.
Yeah, I had a date with him, and, it was, I kind of felt like I was, if you were in school and I were the teacher.
The kiss created an awkward dynamic on set for a period. Williams was playing Henderson's son in scenes that required maternal affection and family warmth. Henderson had to navigate being a mother figure to someone who'd recently kissed her romantically. Production continued without major incident. The professionalism both actors maintained kept the situation from exploding into scandal. But everyone on set knew what had happened, and the knowledge changed how they viewed the relationship between Carol Brady and her oldest son. While Williams was dealing with his complicated feelings for his TV mother, the younger Brady kids were developing their own romantic entanglements that nobody suspected until years later. Barry Williams and Maureen McCormick filmed episodes in Hawaii during the show's run. The tropical location, the time away from the studio, and the teenage hormones created a situation that producers hadn't anticipated. Williams and McCormick, who played siblings Greg and Marcia Brady, started a brief romantic relationship.
Well, you would have just said to mind my own business.
Yep, that's what I'd have said, all right.
I only did it because I thought it was for your own good.
They kept it quiet from adults, but the other Brady kids knew. Filming family scenes became strange when two of the siblings were actually dating off camera. They'd hold hands between takes. They'd find excuses to spend time together away from the rest of the cast. The relationship didn't last beyond the Hawaii filming. They were teenagers playing at romance in an exotic location. Once they returned to Los Angeles and the regular production schedule, whatever had sparked between them faded, but they'd crossed a line that made their on-screen sibling relationship permanently weird. Mike Lookinland and Susan Olsen were younger than Williams and McCormick, but they followed a similar pattern. Lookinland played Bobby, the youngest Brady boy. Olsen played Cindy, the youngest Brady girl. At some point during the show's run, they kissed in the doghouse on set.
Rate the kiss on a scale from 1 to 10 with Barry.
And remember, I can hear you.
It was good.
Right.
But it was not my first kiss. Barry, were you implying that it was my first or my first with you?
They were children when it happened, young enough that the kiss was more about curiosity than actual romance. But like Williams and McCormick, they'd turned their TV sibling relationship into something else, even if just for a moment. The pattern extended to Christopher Knight and other cast members at various points. The Brady kids were spending more time together than with their actual families. They were going through puberty together. They were attractive young people in close proximity for years. Romance was inevitable. Producers either didn't know or chose to ignore what was happening. The Brady Bunch was selling wholesome family entertainment. The reality that the TV siblings were kissing each other off camera would have destroyed the image if it became public. The cast kept these relationships secret for decades. It wasn't until they were adults, long after the show ended, that Williams and others started revealing what had actually happened behind the scenes. By then, the Brady Bunch had been off the air long enough that the revelations felt more nostalgic than scandalous. But while some Brady kids were finding romance with each other, two of the TV sisters were developing a hatred that would last for 50 years. Maureen McCormick and Eve Plum played sisters Marcia and Jan Brady on screen. Off-screen, they couldn't stand each other. The tension started early in the show's run and never went away. Susan Olsen, who played their younger sister Cindy, found herself constantly caught in the middle of their feud. The hatred wasn't based on a single incident. It was accumulated resentment built over years of working together. McCormick was the pretty popular one, both on screen and off. Plum was the middle sister, always in Marcia's shadow on the show, and apparently feeling the same way in real life.
No, I mean, Glass. George Glass. That's funny. I've never heard of a George Glass at our school. That's because he's a transfer student.
They maintained professionalism during filming. They delivered their lines. They acted like sisters who loved each other. But the moment cameras stopped rolling, they avoided each other. They didn't socialize. They didn't talk unless required for work. The feud intensified after the Brady Bunch ended. McCormick wrote a memoir years later where she claimed she'd kissed Plum during their time on the show. She described it as a brief experimental moment between two young women.
And I said, and I even kissed Eve. And I was just having fun.
Right.
And right away, I guess everybody thought that
you were gay.
That we were gay.
Yeah. Right.
And she freaked out. And I called her just to tell her that I had done this in fun and, you know, isn't this fun?
Right.
And she has never talked to me since.
Plum denied the story completely. She told reporters she found McCormick's claim tiresome and attention-seeking. The public dispute over whether the kiss happened added new layers to their already toxic relationship. A Brady Bunch reunion was planned for 2010. All the surviving cast members were supposed to participate, but Plum refused to be in the same room as McCormick. The organizers tried to negotiate. They offered to keep the two women separated during the event. Plum still refused. The reunion was canceled.
Yeah, but here's what you're saying. You didn't like Eve Plum because she turned down a lot of the Brady Bunch reunions and it ruined stuff for you.
No, that's not true at all.
All right, then what is the reason?
That's not true at all. Okay, so Eve, I was trying to still be her friend, you know, over all these years, and she just kept like pulling away more and more and more.
Decades after the show ended, the feud between Marcia and Jan Brady was still powerful enough to prevent the cast from coming together. The other cast members were frustrated but not surprised. They'd watched the hatred between McCormick and Plum play out for years. Olsen talked publicly about being caught between them, trying to maintain friendships with both women while they refused to speak to each other. She described it as exhausting and sad, watching two people waste decades on hatred over things that had happened when they were teenagers. While McCormick and Plum were building their feud, another cast member was fighting battles with the show itself that nobody watching at home could see. Robert Reed played Mike Brady, the patriarch of America's favorite blended family. Off camera, Reed hated almost everything about the Brady Bunch. He thought the scripts were terrible. He thought the storylines were unrealistic. He thought the show was beneath his abilities as a serious actor.
That you have been chosen Father of the Year.
Father of the Year?
Reed had trained in Shakespeare. He'd performed in prestigious theater productions. He viewed himself as a dramatic actor who'd somehow ended up on a lightweight sitcom about a family with 6 kids and a maid. The cognitive dissonance tormented him. He argued with producers constantly. Every script generated notes from Reed about what was wrong with it. Plot holes, character inconsistencies, dialogue that no real person would ever say. Reed documented everything he thought was stupid or unrealistic about each episode. The producers found Reed exhausting. They were making a family sitcom, not prestige television. The audience was children and parents looking for harmless entertainment. Reed's complaints about realism and character development were irrelevant to what the Brady Bunch was trying to accomplish. Reed refused to film certain scenes he considered too ridiculous. He'd argue until producers either changed the scene or found ways to shoot around him. The conflict created delays and tension that affected the entire production. Despite hating the show, Reed delivered strong performances. His professionalism as an actor wouldn't allow him to phone it in just because he didn't respect the material. Mike Brady became an iconic television father, partly because Reed committed fully to the role even while despising it.
You've always been an A student in math. How come that F?
I got the answers wrong.
The cast knew about Reed's unhappiness, but couldn't do anything about it. They were stuck between Reed and the producers, watching the fights play out while trying to stay out of the crossfire. Florence Henderson occasionally tried to mediate, but Reed's disdain for the show was too deep to be managed. Reed stayed with the Brady Bunch for its entire run, despite wanting to leave. The steady paycheck and the fame kept him locked in. He appeared in Brady Bunch reunion movies and specials years later, still complaining about the quality of the writing while cashing the checks. But Reed's struggles with the show's scripts were nothing compared to what he was hiding from everyone about his personal life. Robert Reed was he knew it. He'd known it for years. But the Brady Bunch filmed during an era when being openly Hollywood meant career suicide. Reed stayed closeted throughout the show's run and for years afterward.
We now know that he was at the time he died of AIDS, the poor guy.
I know.
But it's interesting. Did you know he was at the time? You did, but no one else in America knew it.
No one on the show did. I was the first one that realized it.
Playing Mike Brady, the ultimate television father and husband, while hiding created enormous psychological pressure. Reed had to portray hetero romance with Florence Henderson. He had to model traditional masculinity for young viewers, all while knowing his real life contradicted everything Mike Brady represented. Reed kept his personal life completely separate from his professional life. The cast didn't know. The crew didn't know. The producers suspected but didn't ask because they didn't want confirmation. As long as Reed kept it private, they could pretend not to notice.
Our director, John Rich, who's a very strong, tough director who created every hit show probably on television, and he didn't like something Bob was doing, and he nailed him and again, and Bob got very cranky and started, an argument, and all of a sudden I went, Bob.
The secrecy required constant vigilance. Reed couldn't date openly. He couldn't bring partners to industry events. He couldn't risk anyone seeing him in situations that might reveal his. The isolation was crushing but necessary for career survival. Reed had a brief romantic involvement with Florence Henderson at some point. Whether it was an attempt to convince himself he could be or just a moment of connection between two lonely people was never clear. Henderson described it as a one-time occurrence that didn't change their working relationship. The involvement with Henderson added another layer of complexity to Reed's situation. He was trying to perform personal life the same way he performed it on screen. The lines between Robert Reed and Mike Brady blurred in ways that made both roles harder to maintain. Reed's dissatisfaction with the Brady Bunch scripts took on new meaning in this context. He was fighting with producers, partly because he resented being trapped in a show that celebrated traditional family values he couldn't personally embody. Every episode about Mike and Carol's happy marriage reminded Reed of the life he couldn't have publicly. The secret consumed enormous energy that Reed could have used for other things. Instead of focusing on his craft or pursuing roles he cared about, he spent years hiding fundamental truths about himself. The cost wouldn't become fully clear until years later, but it was already destroying him from the inside. While Reed was hiding his The youngest Brady girl was dealing with a near-fatal accident that producers tried to keep quiet. Susan Olsen's first day filming The Brady Bunch started with equipment falling from a catwalk above the set. The heavy piece struck Olsen directly in the face. She was 7 years old. The impact knocked her down. Blood came immediately. Her face swelled up. Crew members rushed to help while producers assessed the situation. Olsen was crying and confused about what had happened. Producers called for medical attention. Doctors examined Olsen and determined she didn't have any serious injuries beyond bruising and swelling. No broken bones, no concussion symptoms, just a very painful and visible injury to her face. The production had a decision to make. They could shut down filming for the day or week to let Olsen recover, or they could continue and work around her injuries. They chose to continue. Olsen came back to set the next day with visible bruises on her face. The makeup department did what they could to cover the damage. Cinematographers adjusted lighting to minimize how obvious the injuries looked. Filming continued like nothing had happened. Nobody from the production issued statements about the accident. No press releases explained why Cindy Brady had bruises in certain episodes. The incident was kept as quiet as possible to avoid questions about safety protocols on set. Olsen talked about the accident years later, describing how frightening it had been and how quickly everyone moved past it. She'd been a child who'd nearly been seriously injured on a professional production, and the response was to cover it up and keep filming. The accident revealed how expendable child actors were considered during that era. Olsen's safety mattered less than keeping the production on schedule. The show's reputation mattered less than avoiding publicity about dangerous working conditions. Olsen continued working on The Brady Bunch for years after the accident. She developed a love-hate relationship with the show that defined her childhood. The accident was just one of many incidents that complicated how she viewed her time as Cindy Brady. Meanwhile, another Brady kid was facing fears on camera that nobody else on set understood. Christopher Knight had to film a scene where a tarantula crawled on him. The script called for Peter Brady to be scared of the spider, which matched perfectly with how Knight actually felt about having a large spider placed on his body. The crew assured Knight that the tarantula was harmless. They told him it couldn't hurt him. They explained that tarantulas look scarier than they actually are. Knight was 11 years old, and none of these assurances made him feel better about the situation. They placed the spider on Knight during filming. He could feel its legs moving across his skin. He could see its body and its eyes. Every instinct screamed at him to brush it off or run away, but he had to stay still and deliver his lines.
Oh, come on, Pete, knock it off.
Knight maintained composure through the take. He didn't panic. He didn't ruin the shot. He performed the scene as directed while terrified that the spider might bite him or do something unpredictable. The professionalism required from a child actor in that moment was extraordinary. The crew congratulated Knight after the scene wrapped. They praised his performance and his bravery. Knight didn't feel brave. He felt like he'd survived something traumatic that he'd been forced to do for the show. Knight revealed years later how terrified he'd actually been during that shoot. The behind-the-scenes story transformed a cute television moment into something darker. A child had been scared and forced to perform anyway because the scene required it. The spider scene became iconic. Viewers remembered Peter Brady and the tarantula for decades after the episode aired. Nobody watching understood that Knight's fear wasn't acting. His performance was so convincing because it was real. The incident was part of a pattern on The Brady Bunch, where child actors were pushed beyond their comfort zones for the sake of entertainment. The adults in charge prioritized getting the shot over protecting the children from experiences that frightened or endangered them. While Knight was being traumatized by spiders, other Brady kids were finding ways to escape the pressure by exploring places they weren't supposed to be. Florence Henderson played Carol Brady, the perfect television mother. Off camera, Henderson worked just as hard to maintain harmony among the cast and crew. She viewed herself as responsible for keeping everyone's spirits up during difficult production days.
In a recent poll, my next guest was found to be television's most popular star, with kids between the ages of 6 and 16, and also one of television's top 10 personalities with adults. How she does with animals, we don't know, but those are the two polls. Will you welcome, please, the popular Mrs. Brady, and not only that, the lovely Florence Henderson.
Henderson had a sense of humor that lightened tense situations. When arguments broke out or stress levels rose, Henderson would crack jokes or find ways to make people laugh. The mood on set often depended on Henderson's energy. She paid special attention to the child actors. Henderson understood that the Brady kids were dealing with pressures that most children never experienced. She made herself available to talk when they needed someone to confide in who wasn't their actual parents.
It truly was one of the greatest moments ever for me. I was so touched, you know, by her just being there all the time.
Henderson also mediated conflicts between Robert Reed and the producers. She couldn't fix Reed's fundamental unhappiness with the show, but she could smooth over individual incidents before they exploded into major problems. Her diplomatic skills kept production functioning during Reed's worst periods. The cast loved Henderson for her warmth and accessibility. She wasn't distant or pretentious despite being the show's leading lady. She treated everyone on set with respect, regardless of their position or age. Henderson's ability to foster a familial environment on set made the Brady Bunch set feel different from other productions. The warmth that viewers saw on screen reflected genuine affection that Henderson had cultivated among the cast over years of working together. But Henderson's efforts couldn't fix everything. Some problems were too deep or too personal for humor and warmth to solve. Some cast members carried issues that no amount of maternal energy could address. And one cast member in particular was growing increasingly uncomfortable with everything the Brady Bunch represented. Eve Plum hated being associated with the Brady Bunch. She found the show's squeaky clean image oppressive and false. As she got older, her discomfort with being Jan Brady intensified until she couldn't tolerate it anymore. Plum wanted to be taken seriously as an actress. She pursued roles in darker, more complex projects that had nothing to do with family sitcoms. She actively tried to distance herself from the Brady Bunch in every interview and public appearance.
I notice a little bitterness on the Brady Bunch. Is there some bitterness there?
No, it's not bitterness. It's just that the sheer repetition of the whole thing, it's next to impossible to be what I don't know but want me to be.
The problem was that audiences couldn't separate Eve Plum from Jan Brady. Casting directors saw Jan when they looked at her. Fans approached her expecting the character rather than the person. The role she'd played as a child had become a prison she couldn't escape. Plum refused to participate in some Brady Bunch reunion projects. She didn't want to keep reinforcing the association. She needed people to see her as something other than the middle Brady daughter. The refusals created tension with other cast members who wanted to capitalize on the show's nostalgia value.
I have a question. I was wondering, do you still have relationships with like your brothers and sisters that were on the show at that time?
No, I don't really see them much, no.
When Plum did participate in reunions, her discomfort was visible. She gave interviews where she made clear that the Brady Bunch wasn't representative of her beliefs or her work. She wanted everyone to understand that Jan Brady was a character she'd played, not who she actually was. The more Plum pushed against the Brady Bunch, the more people associated her with it. Her resistance became part of her story. Articles about Plum always mentioned how much she hated being known for the show.
I just would like to know if Eve would reenact something for us.
No.
We just want her to do Marsha, Marsha, Marsha.
Well, there, you just did it. There you go.
Plum's struggle highlighted the cost of child stardom. She'd been successful at a young age in a role that defined her forever. No matter what she accomplished afterward, Jan Brady remained the first thing people thought about when they heard her name. The frustration shaped her entire career and created bitterness that never fully disappeared. While Plum was fighting to escape Jan Brady, other cast members were discovering that being associated with the Brady Bunch had destroyed their chances of being anything else. The Brady Bunch made the cast members famous. It also made them unemployable in many casting directors' eyes. Being known as one of the Brady kids meant being seen as that character forever, unable to play anything else convincingly. Barry Williams tried to land serious film roles after the show ended. Casting directors couldn't see past Greg Brady. They'd watch his auditions and only see the oldest Brady son trying to play someone else. Williams lost role after role to actors without his sitcom baggage. Christopher Knight faced the same problems. Peter Brady was tattooed across his forehead as far as Hollywood was concerned. Knight couldn't escape the association, no matter how different the roles he auditioned for were from his Brady Bunch character. Maureen McCormick had it worst. She was America's sweetheart, the pretty teenage girl that everyone loved as Marsha Brady. That image made her untouchable for edgier or more complex roles. Directors wanted the wholesome image or nothing at all.
Well,
when you got out of the Brady Bunch,
right.
Was it a come down for you? Was it hard for you to get parts after the Brady Bunch?
Yeah.
The Brady kids watched other young actors land diverse roles and build successful careers while they struggled to get auditions. Their success on the Brady Bunch had become the thing preventing them from having any other success. Some cast members eventually accepted their fate and leaned into the Brady Association. They did reunion shows and appearances. They made money from nostalgia. But the acceptance came with bitterness about what might have been if they'd never been Brady kids. Mike Lukenland essentially gave up on acting. He couldn't get roles that interested him and didn't want to spend his life being Bobby Brady at nostalgia events. He walked away from the industry to build a different life. The typecasting revealed how ruthless Hollywood was about categorizing actors. Once you were placed in a box, getting out was nearly impossible. The Brady Bunch had given them fame and financial success as children, then taken away their futures as adult actors. And for some cast members, the inability to move forward created problems far worse than damaged careers. Maureen McCormick started using after the Brady Bunch ended. The transition from child star to unemployed adult was brutal. The helped numb the disappointment and the loss of identity that came with being Marsha Brady with nowhere to go. The use escalated quickly. McCormick went from casual user to addict within months. She needed the function. Everything in her life started revolving around getting high and staying high.
Loved it.
Because it released your inhibitions.
Yeah, it did. It
But I mean,
did. And it numbed me out from a lot of pain and depression.
But you imply in the book
Right.
that you were so heavily addicted to coke, you were a pretty easy lay back then. I mean, guys could get you.
I was if they had coke, yeah.
McCormick traded for when she ran out of money. The wholesome image from the Brady Bunch made the degradation worse. America's perfect teenage daughter was sleeping with dealers to feed her addiction. She developed bulimia alongside addiction. McCormick's relationship with her body and her self-worth collapsed completely. She was destroying herself in every way possible. A crucial audition for Raiders of the Lost Ark came up in 1980. The role could have resurrected McCormick's career and given her the serious dramatic work she'd been chasing. She missed the audition because she was too high to function. Missing that audition became a turning point. McCormick realized she just destroyed possibly her last chance at a real career. The had taken everything from her, including the one opportunity that might have saved her professionally.
I started feeling it, and it was just amazing. I couldn't stop.
What did it feel like?
I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like I could do anything.
Right.
I felt like I was perfect.
McCormick's parents intervened. They forced her into treatment over her objections. She was furious at them for interfering, but too far gone to save herself without help. The recovery process was long and painful. McCormick had to rebuild her life from nothing while dealing with the shame of what she'd become. The tabloids eventually got the story, and America's image of Marsha Brady was permanently tarnished. McCormick achieved sobriety and maintained it for over 40 years. She talked publicly about her addiction, using her story to help others. But the years lost and the career opportunities destroyed by her addiction never came back. The damage was permanent. While McCormick was destroying herself with cocaine, another Brady kid was developing a different addiction that would nearly him. Mike Lukenland spent his childhood working on the Brady Bunch. He never had normal kid experiences. No playing in the neighborhood, no school with other children his age, no summers off, just work constantly playing Bobby Brady.
Right off the Brady Bunch, I did The Towering Inferno. And that was a huge epic. You know, the script's 250 pages or something. And that took 4 months. And then 20th Century Fox wanted to cast me in Swiss Family Robinson, which was a new series.
When the shows ended, Lukenland tried to reclaim the childhood he'd missed. He was in his 20s, too old for actual childhood, but emotionally stuck at the age when he'd started working. The confusion about who he was and what he'd lost manifested as increasingly reckless behavior.
The problem for me was, I lived my childhood in my 20s. You should really try to live your childhood when you're a child, because if you do it when you're 26, it can be dangerous.
Lukenland started drinking heavily. The alcohol helped him cope with feeling like he'd been robbed of something essential. Every drink pushed away the emptiness and the confusion about his identity beyond Bobby Brady. The drinking progressed to alcoholism. Lukenland couldn't stop once he started. He'd drink until he passed out or until someone intervened. His life narrowed to revolving around alcohol the same way it had once revolved around the Brady Bunch production schedule. In 1997, Lookinland got arrested for DUI. The incident was public and embarrassing. Bobby Brady, the youngest Brady boy, had become a middle-aged alcoholic getting arrested for drunk driving.
I lived my childhood in my 20s. You should really try to live your childhood when you're a child, because if you do it when you're 26, it can be dangerous. I loved alcohol. First time I had a drink, oh boy, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. When it became clear that the choice wasn't between sobering up or drinking, but the choice was actually between living or dying, then it became a simple choice for me.
The DUI forced Lookinland to confront his addiction. He couldn't pretend anymore that his drinking was under control. The legal consequences and the public humiliation pushed him toward getting help. Lookinland entered rehabilitation. The process of getting sober meant facing everything he'd been drinking to avoid. The lost childhood, the stunted emotional development, the anger at being a child actor who'd never gotten to be a child. Recovery also meant accepting that he'd never reclaim what the Brady Bunch had taken from him. Those years were gone. He couldn't go back and have a normal childhood. All he could do was move forward as a sober adult and try to build a life separate from Bobby Brady. Lookinland credited the DUI with saving his life. Without that turning point, he believed the alcoholism would have killed him. The arrest was the consequence he needed to finally change. But even as he was getting sober, the show's legacy was creating problems for another cast member in ways nobody had anticipated. Robert Reed died in 1992 from colon cancer. At least that's what the death certificate said. The reality was more complicated. Reed had been diagnosed HIV positive years earlier. The virus had weakened his immune system and likely contributed to the cancer that killed him. Reed kept his HIV status secret the same way he'd kept his sex secret. He didn't want to be defined by AIDS during an era when the disease carried enormous stigma. He wanted to be remembered as an actor, not as another tragedy of the AIDS crisis. The secrecy extended to his final days. Reed was hospitalized and dying, but only a few people close to him knew about the HIV diagnosis. The public narrative remained focused on colon cancer, the acceptable terminal illness that didn't raise questions about how he'd contracted it. Reed's death hit the Brady Bunch cast hard. He'd been difficult and demanding and unhappy with the show, but he'd also been their TV father for years. Florence Henderson was devastated. The Brady kids had lost the man who'd played the role that defined healthy fatherhood for millions of Americans. The truth about Reed's HIV status eventually came out, but not immediately. For a period, the official story of death by colon cancer stood unchallenged. Reed got the privacy he'd wanted, at least temporarily. When the HIV diagnosis became public knowledge, it recontextualized Reed's entire life and career. The unhappiness on the Brady Bunch, the conflicts with producers, the secrecy and isolation. Everything made more sense through the lens of a closeted gay man hiding a terminal diagnosis while playing America's ideal father. Reed never got to live openly. He never got to be himself without fear of professional and social consequences. He played Mike Brady for decades while knowing that his real life contradicted everything that character represented. The performance cost him everything, and he died still performing, still hiding, still trapped by the role that had made him famous and miserable. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.